Welcome, everyone. I'm Lauren Hawkins. Thanks for tuning in with us to Spirituality Adventures. We are so glad you're here, and we're very excited about the content we get to share with you through our blogs and podcasts. Spirituality Adventures is made possible by your support. One way you can support us is by liking, following, subscribing, or sharing any of these podcasts or blogs that you like. Another way you can support us is by going to our website, www.spiritualityadventures.com. There you can click the support tab and you can sign up for a monthly subscription or a one-time gift. We appreciate all your support. Now here's Fred.
Welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality. And we are so honored to have with us for a part 2 interview. So if you're jumping into this interview and you didn't hear part 1, this is part 2. So I just want to encourage you to back up and catch part 1 with, and I'm honored to have the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia with me today, Tamrat Layne. Tamrat, thank you for joining us today. And we left off at a very pivotal point in your life. Your life as a young person growing up in Ethiopia, studying communist ideology, then experiencing a dictator communist, which you and your buddies decided that you wanted to overthrow, built a guerrilla army, grew to 150,000 people. And in 1991, you overthrew that communist dictator. You put into place a new government, and you were serving as the prime minister. You started studying your MBA with London and started moving into some different ideology, a little bit more of a free market ideology, all of that.
One. Yeah.
And a new election was coming up, and your friend who was the president was thinking you might become the new president. All of that together created. Pick up with the story right there. So what happened at this juncture?
Yeah, you summarized it very well. And then I became a threat generally to the system, to the government. And then he has to do something. So he started conspiring with others. And he manufactured, I can say, an issue and accused me of abuse of power, he called it. And I was arrested one fine morning.
One fine morning.
while I was in my office, his personal bodyguards came and took me from the office. But before that, a year or so, maybe 2 years before that, our relationship, I knew and I understood that our relationship was getting sour, and getting more and more far away to one another. And I even told my wife one time, after a breakfast we had in our home and before departing to our offices, and my wife was working on her own and me to my office. So I told her, listen, maybe my time with this party and with this government is coming to an end. I told her this maybe a year or so ago, before I was arrested.
Okay.
So I knew that it's coming to an end or something will happen. There were symptoms here and there, things here and there that gets us into conflict and into, different ideas and opposed ideas and things like that. And the communist culture generally, the communist organizational or ideological culture generally is because it's based on class struggle, the theory of class struggle, which means different classes, different opinions are enemies. That's how communism is. Once you are a communist, then you see everything as an enemy and a friend. There is no middle way. And if you say somebody or some idea, even an idea is different from yours, opposed from yours, then that's enemy. That's an enemy class within the enemy category. So that's the whole mindset that we grew up with. And that's why when I came up with different ideas, they considered that as a threat. I also know, because that I am also in that mindset, I also know that they will consider me as a threat. So that's why. So anyway, one fine morning when I went to my office, his bodyguards came and they just took me and put me to first for the first 2 months or 3 or 2.5 months, they put me in a kind of house arrest, but in the palace. It's a jail, but it's in a palace, within the palace compound. So there are places. So that's how they did. And they declared to the people that we arrested him because of abuse of power.
I've driven by the palace.
Yeah.
It kind of sits, there's a highway and it sits up
Exactly.
the hill a little
On
bit.
a high hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see it.
I've just seen it driving by it.
And they told you this is a palace.
Yeah. It looked nice.
It is nice. And it's a very old historical place. But there are prisons there in that compound.
Okay.
So they put me in one of them.
Interesting.
For about 2.5, 3 months. And then they accused me without my presence. They started telling, with their media and so on, he's accused of power, abuse of power and things like that. And he took money and things like that. So after about 3 months there, they took me to the central jail place. Everyone knows what the central jail means. It's a prison, another prison, in a dark room, completely dark room by myself and so on, for about a year there. And even chained, handcuffed, sometimes my hands, sometimes my feet and all that. And then they had this kangaroo court closed, and I was not allowed to even defend myself properly. And they sentenced me to 18 years. Handpicked judges, special court they called it, just for my case, not even in an ordinary institution of justice. Just for my case, 3 handpicked judges were there. And that was only for the international community, because the American government, the British and other governments, Westerners, they started asking, why is he arrested? Why is he in jail? Why is he, what did he made wrong? And things like that. And for them, for their consumption, he said, because of abuse of power, and this abuse of power is appealing both to the people in the nation and also for the international community, for the ambassadors and so on. Abuse of power. So for that, and then this kangaroo court is also for the international community mainly. So they say, it's up to the court, So they sentenced him 18 years. But the whole judicial review was not there. The whole proceeding was a sham. I was not allowed to, defend or witness or something. That's all. So 18 years. Went to jail. The first year was very different. So that was a chapter that, as you said earlier, that's a pivotal point in my life. There started another chapter of my life.
Right.
In prison. And
sentenced for 18 years.
18 years.
And you were married.
Yes, I was married.
With 2 children.
2 children of 4 years old and a month old when I was
1 month
in prison. Yeah, 1 month.
And what happened to them? You're sent to prison.
I was sent to prison. My wife was just out of the organization. They take her out. And also from her job, she became jobless.
And we didn't mention it, but you too, she was a guerrilla warfare fighter too. You met in the army.
We met in the army.
Right.
After 4 years in the mountains, she joined us.
Okay.
From her high school. She was a high school student.
Okay.
In her teenage.
Wow. Young people fight wars, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
She joined us and she became guerrilla fighter. So, and we get married after, in 1985. She joined us in 1980, I think. And after a while, we get married there while we were in the mountain.
Okay.
So she became jobless. So my son, who was 4 years old, he used to go to school. He couldn't because she didn't have anything to pay for school. So he was forced to get out. And then she finally she couldn't live there. And she was even threatened, government, police, or intelligence people, they were following her everywhere else. And because they wanted her not to meet people and things like that, because they suspected that she would do something. Anyways, she had to flee. So she fled to Kenya, a neighboring country called Kenya, and she ended up to becoming a refugee in refugee camp.
Yeah. Which is usually very, very poor.
Very difficult.
Very difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
So she's in a refugee camp in Kenya, which is basically like sometimes worse than a slum. I mean, it's
worse than a slum.
Yeah.
Worse than even jail in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
It was very difficult. And, a woman with 2 little children, nothing in her hands, nothing.
Wow.
And it was so difficult for them to be there. And it was a sudden thing, The prime minister suddenly getting into a dungeon.
Right.
And she was working and an employed person and so on, suddenly get into a refugee camp.
Man.
It was very hard.
Wow.
Very, very hard. For them, especially, it was very, very hard. She usually remembers that days in a mixed feeling. On the one hand, she says that's a blessing to that changed my life into a different course, which is good. But on the other hand, when she remembers that, her eyes filled into tears and so emotional. She becomes very emotional when she remembers that. It was a very hard time.
Okay. So they put you in solitary confinement. Is that right?
In solitary confinement by myself. And the first few months was a complete dark room. And I tried even to committing suicide by myself with a broken glass. I tear down my veins, cut my veins. Twice I tried it twice so that I would die of bleeding. I survived. But I served for 12 years in prison out of the 18 that I was sentenced. And out of the 12, most of the years, like about 10 years, I was in solitary confinement.
Okay. And when you went to prison, you were an atheist.
Yes.
Why were you an atheist?
I was a communist before, and then as I told you earlier, as I took that MBA course and as I saw that things are not working on the ground, then I started losing trust on the communism thing. And that MBA that I studied, it really changed my mind. I mean, it was about market economy, it was about freedom, it was about liberty, things like that. And it was an economic management, and it was a practical thing that helped me to change my mind. And when I was in prison, I have already abandoned my communist, faith, so to say, but I still was an atheist. I still didn't believe in God. I had no experience before that even of going to church or reading a Bible or God or things like that. And when I was a communist, I intentionally believed that there is nothing that is any supernatural force, because I studied the philosophy of Marxism-Leninism, which says there is no that kind of force. So I still was an atheist, continued to be an atheist, but seeking for something.
Was it Marx that famous quote about the opiate of the masses?
Yeah, religion is the opium of the masses.
Yeah.
That was a famous thing. So, but I was looking for something. I started looking and seeking for something that I had no idea what it would be, but something that really gives me a relief, or something that gives me sense other than the communist or thing. So in that quest for that something, which I had no idea, I went into reading. The only thing that I was allowed in that solitary confinement was reading books. I could be able to read any kind of books, or they see it and they give it to me. So I started reading of different faiths, different kinds of things. A little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Hinduism, a little bit of Confucian thought, a little bit of things like that. But for some reason, I don't know why, I geared myself towards generally religious things, and these philosophical things. And then finally, I studied Islam for 2 years from Quran, their holy book. I got something from there, and I got something from from different things. Continued to seek something, which I had no idea what that thing would be.
Right.
The only thing I was sure about was that Marxism-Leninism is not working. Communism, I don't need that. But what will be coming, I had no idea.
Wow. So you're searching, you're open.
Searching.
You're reading. So what happened? What happened next? This is several years into solitary.
5 years.
5 years into solitary.
For 5 years, I went through this. And then I was sick one time while I was there, and then I had to be taken to a hospital for treatment. And in that hospital, there was this nurse, a young nurse, whom I don't know, but she's a nurse. She was appointed for me to treat me and give me injections, give me tablets, and so on. She's a nurse, professional nurse. But one day she brought me this piece of paper, a tract we call it, a piece of paper, not much on it, just some things, about 3 things written. And she tucked it under my pillow while she was testing my blood pressure, lying down like this, and she was testing it. And she tucked it on my pillow, under my pillow. I saw that she put something there. And when we're done with the testing and so on, she went out, and I am by myself in that room. And I took out that paper and I started reading it. And then the first thing that says was, Jesus loves you. And I said, who is this Jesus in the first place to love me? And how is that kind of thing? So I just dismissed the idea of Jesus loves you, but also it intrigued me. Of course, before that I heard about Jesus, Jesus the person or something like that, but I didn't go into it in practice, especially. But then it says, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and that even more intrigued me. What the way, the truth, and the life? Okay, but how? And then Jesus is the only one who can give you a new life. It says that. So after that, for a curious reason that I want to know, who is that? What does it mean? And so on. I started asking myself, and this thing get into my mind again and again, and asking and probing. And then at some point, suddenly, I went to my knees and started saying things that I had no idea that was a prayer. But I did that. I was saying, okay, I see that there is Jesus, the name Jesus here, who is able to give a new life somehow, which I don't understand how. And I want, however, that new life, new thing that I have been looking for, that I have been searching. So if this thing is true, show me in some way. That was what I was saying. Again and again, repeatedly, I was saying that. Almost the whole day, continually. Taking breaks and then saying the same thing, taking breaks, and it couldn't get out of my mind what was written in that paper, and the idea of Jesus giving a new life thing. And then in disappointment, nothing happened. Disappointment, I went to my bed and I slept. And in the middle of the night, I just suddenly woke up. And then when I woke up, there was this light in the room, and within that light, there was another light, a drop of light that gets widened from the wall, from one corner of the wall. And I get myself straight and I started looking at it, and the whole thing was light. And there was this figure that looked like a person standing there, but not the details of it, only the shape of a figure made of light. And then there was an audible voice coming from, not from that figure only, but it looks like it comes from all direction of the room. It says, I am Jesus. Believe in me and follow me. If you believe in me and follow me, I am the only one who can give you a new life that you are looking for. So that was it. And then all the light went by and the darkness came back. It was a contrast between darkness and light in a way.
Interesting.
So, but I was on the bed and I had no idea how I fell down. I found myself on the floor, and everything of me was shaking and shivering. And I was involuntarily even weeping and crying. And but despite all this, in the morning, I didn't say, okay, I didn't believe. I said, oh. And I thought that something wrong happened in my mind, like hallucination, or I went being sick or something. That's what I thought. And you can imagine, after all those years of a communist ideology that says there is nothing out there except myself, it was very hard for me to believe. So I took it to mean some kind of hallucination or something that went wrong.
With your mind.
In your mind.
Or with your...
In my mind.
Whatever, yeah.
So, but the next day, I couldn't keep quiet. I continued to, something continued in my mind to work out, bringing back that I saw, bringing back that I heard. And I also said, if this thing is really, the real thing, then why don't you show me again? Why don't I see it back again, just to make sure if that is all. And sure enough, the second day that also happens, the second night, same thing happened. And that voice told me two more things. It said, I will get you out of this place and send you to the world. And you'll testify of me. And it said also to me that, don't be afraid, I'm always with you. And then that was a little bit helpful for me because I started saying, I think this thing must be something real, which I don't really understand what it is. Anyway, then I wrote all my experiences. In fact, it happened also the third night. The same thing happened the third night. So I wrote all that experience in a very short, tiny thing. And when that nurse came back after the third day, I put that into her, nursing jacket. And what I wrote was, I told her that experience, what happened to me, in short, and I asked her to bring me something to read. So there is this reading and something to read so that I would know about this Jesus more. So after a few days, I think 2 or 3 days, she brought me a Bible, a small pocket-sized Bible. She brought me that and she gave it to me. And she told me to read from a book of John. So I started reading the Bible that way. I didn't start from the book of John. I start from the book of Psalms, which is wonderful. And I went through that. And then after that, another person brought me another Bible and started studying. And I started to praying and all that. And for my own surprise, a few days after that, I started feeling at peace for the first time after almost 6 years. I started feeling peace in me that I couldn't understand why. Hope. The next thing was hope. I started saying, I may get out of this place someday. For the first time, I started saying that. Because before that, I was always thinking of being killed. So, and I know that from prison, people were taken and be killed. I know that. So I was waiting my turn to be killed. Even though I was sentenced for imprisonment, I also was suspecting someday they come and kill me. But then I started saying, there is a hope. Someday I may get out of this place. And I also started relating with police guards. There were appointed police guards, 9 of them for me only, in 3 shifts, I started relating with them and telling them about what happened. And they also began to see that something is changing in me, even in my daily habits and, things to do kind of thing. I used to even be weird and bad for them in terms of relationship with them. I was now changing. So they start observing that and they start asking me, Tamrat, what's happening in you? You are becoming good these days.
More loving.
More loving and saying, how are you? Good morning and so on. So anyway, so that kind of thing happened in me. And I went on studying the Bible. And what happened also after this is the more I studied and I 7 more years I stayed there after I have this event. So the more I studied and the more I prayed and the more I started looking back my whole life and turn every chapter and turn every idea that I had and look into my mistakes that I did, everything back. And the more I see that, the more I was changing. Shift of mind, shift of, attitudes, ideas, and things like that. It was like washing. And in that sense, it was good that I stayed for 7 more years. In that sense. And I love it, by the way. Love it in the sense that it became a reason for a change in my life.
Wow. So while you were in for 12 years, what happened to Mulu while she was in Kenya?
Mulu and our 2 children went to Kenya. They ended up in refugee camp, as I said earlier, and they stayed there for 3 years. And she was also a communist, by the way, an atheist, communist. And one time, one of the police guards who was intrigued by my change and then became, of course, changed for himself. He became a believer. He was a communist. And he became a, believer. He started believing in God. And then one time he brought me a cell phone and a number, and he gave it to me and he said, this is between you and me, okay? And here is a cell phone and here is a number for Mulu, he said, and he knows her. And I got this number of Mulu while she was in Kenya number, from your sister, he told me, from my sister. So he said, I give you 30 minutes, call her just to say hello. And he knows before that I had no communication, no even a visit. Mulu was not allowed to visit me while I was in prison before she went to Kenya. So that's why, out of compassion, he gave it to me and I called her. And I called her and I started telling her what happened in me. Now I believe in Jesus and things like that. And she heard me and she said, when did that happen? And I told her the nights. And she said, exactly on those days, I also had this vision. And now I am following Jesus too. So after that, after 3 years in refugee camp, she and our children, through a U.S. embassy in Kenya and through United Nations, they came to America as immigrants, and they came to Colorado. And I knew that they came to Colorado from my sister, because after she came to the U.S., my sister called. They were communicating. So that's what happened to Mulu.
Wow.
But the other thing that happened very radically changed really my thoughts and my mind is that when I came out of prison, the next day or two, no, after 3 days, I think, I called to the chief of the intelligence, who was the right-hand person of the president, my former friend who put me to jail. I called to him and I said to him, and we know each other when we were in the mountains with that chief of intelligence person. So I told him, I want to see the president, my former friend.
Right.
And I want to see him just to say hello. And of course, he couldn't believe that at first. And he asked me, are you serious about that? Yes, I am. He couldn't believe, because after 12 years, and he knows that he's the one who put me to jail and all that. And he might have suspected even that I wanted to take revenge. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe to kill him or to try to kill him. But I told him just to say hello and so on. So he said, I will call him and tell you if he agrees. And he called me the next day or two. And then he told me he agreed to meet you, the president. And it was another surprise for me because, agreed to meet me after all those things. It was remote. So I went to his office. I met him. Long story short, I met him. And I told him that I forgave him. And I did while I was in prison. I forgave him. But before that, I was mad. And I was, every time I was thinking of taking revenge upon him. I was even thinking of how to kill him, though I was not certain that I would come out of that prison. So to that extent, I was really in hatred, in a big hatred, and I wanted to take revenge. But then after I met Jesus and after I was changed, at some point I said, I forgave him while I was in prison. So that's why I called and I wanted to tell him. So I told him that. It was surprising for him, but he really believed it because he saw that I was changing. Through our conversation, we had about 2 hours conversation, an hour and a half or two, in his office, and I told him what happened, all the things, and that I'm changing and so on. So he somehow understood that I am really changing. So that is another thing, another big thing that happened in my life.
Yeah.
Forgiving that friend of mine.
That's amazing.
In 2012, he died of, he was sick and he died in the hospital in Europe. And I felt sad.
Beautiful. Wow. Man, forgiveness. It sets us free when we do that, right?
Yes, it sets us free.
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness is a good thing, but it's not easy.
It
was not easy for me too, by the way. It took me a year and a half, maybe, that I struggled with myself to forgive.
Yeah. I understand.
Sometimes
in a much
tears.
smaller way, I can understand. Yeah. Well, man, what an amazing story. So you end up, how did you get out early? You served 12 years of your 18 years. How did you get out early? Because when you had that talk with the president, so you went into prison in 95 or 6? 96. 96?
Yeah, October 96.
What year was it when you met with the president and told him you forgave him? December 2008. Oh, that was in 2008?
Yeah. December 2008. So 12 years. I served 12 years. I came here and joined my family in 2009, January. And I was there. After I was released, I stayed for 1 month.
When you saw the president, that's when you got out?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. All right. That's the first thing you did, basically.
The first thing I did.
Okay.
Yeah. So after I met him, I came here through the U.S. Embassy again and joined my family.
In Denver?
Joined my wife and our 2 children in Denver, and she waited for me for
Wow.
12 years. An amazing woman. And our children, they were 12 years and 16, 12 and 16 when I
Wow.
got back. And we had to work out again, you know.
Who is this? They didn't know their dad.
Yeah, they have to know.
Mm-hmm.
They had to know. Of course, they know through pictures and how, you know, their mom tells them and so on. And our son knows. He was 4 when I was arrested, and he knows everything. He remembers. And but we had to come back again to become friends and so on. And it took some time.
I bet.
It was not easy.
All of a sudden you have an American teenager.
Yeah, by then they have already become Americans.
To some degree, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, culturally.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing story. Wow. So since you've been rejoined with your family in Denver, and I don't know that I realized it when I met you in 2010. I don't, maybe I did, but I don't know that I realized you'd only been out of prison for 2 years. Maybe I did. I don't, for some reason I thought anyway, but that was your first national prayer breakfast that we met at.
That was my
2010.
first national prayer breakfast, 2010, my first one. And I was only a year
out of prison.
Wow.
Amazing.
2008, December, almost 2009. And a friend of mine, an Ethiopian friend of mine, took me to, he's the one who introduced me to people at the prayer breakfast, and they invited me to be there.
Okay.
That's how we met.
Very awesome.
Yeah.
So since being in America, what has been occupying your time, your family's time, other than being a husband and a father? What have you been doing?
Meeting with people, doing small groups of life. I call it small groups of life sharing. Going around to different places and speaking and sharing my life. In churches, in conferences, in prayer breakfasts, with seminars and so on. The first 3 years until I get my green card, I was, here in the US only, traveling to different states and meet friends, new friends, and go to different places and speak and share my life. Most of the times together with my wife, share our lives and so on. And people were blessed by that, and we were talking about forgiveness. We're talking about changes in life, transformation. We're talking about getting into challenge, but coming back. And then we started traveling out of the US, going back to Africa, going to the Middle East, going to Asia, and also Europe to some extent, but mostly to Africa, Middle East, and Asia. And do same thing. Speaking in conferences, seminars, and then start small groups, life sharing small groups. And training, giving training, leadership training for young leaders, especially.
Okay.
Meeting young leaders, young people, and share life with them, and give training and speaking. This has been what we have been doing.
Awesome.
And also we have a ministry, by the way, an organization that we support. My wife basically started that. It's her child, I can say. of helping orphans and widows in Ethiopia. It's called Life Center. And we have about 200 children that we are supporting right now. And we have 100 or so widows, women, poor widows, that we are helping through sponsorship, mainly from America and so on.
So you have 2 orphanages in Ethiopia, one in Addis, which I visited when the last time I was in Ethiopia was in 2018.
2018, I think.
And I visited the orphanage in Ethiopia. Mulu was there.
Yeah.
And then you have another one that's north of Addis where Mulu is from.
Yeah.
And how would people find out about that? Like if they wanted to learn, is there a website or your Facebook or Instagram?
Yeah, we are in Facebook. We have a website called lifecenterethiopia.org. lifecenterethiopia.org. That's a website. And we are also on Facebook and Instagram.
Same
Center,
name?
Same thing, yeah. Same name, Life Center Ethiopia.
Life Center Ethiopia.
Yeah.
On Facebook and Instagram. Okay.
Yeah, that's,
very good.
So the organization started here in America. We have a 501c3 and also in Ethiopia we are licensed. So.
Yeah. And are Ethiopians in America, have you had connections with different pastors in the Ethiopian community in America?
Yeah, we have different connections with churches and with individuals, Ethiopians, in different states. And in the states we live in, we also sometimes go to Ethiopian churches. But our church mainly is American church. But we have different kinds of communications and connections with Ethiopians. And different opinions about me among the Ethiopians.
Right.
Yeah, because of political reasons, some don't agree with me. But I also believe that most of Ethiopians, they understand and they like me, and I love all of them, whichever way it is. I like them. Yeah.
Well, I know I fell in love with Ethiopia and I love Ethiopians. And so anytime I get a chance to meet somebody from Ethiopia, and I bump into Ethiopians here in Kansas City quite often. And I'm pretty good at like guessing that they might be Ethiopian, and most of the time it turns out they are. And then they're always amazed that I've been to Ethiopia, and it's always been a fun conversation.
You did a lot of things in Ethiopia. I mean, through Vineyard, I know that. And I also met some Ethiopians in Ethiopia when I was in Ethiopia the last 3 years.
So Woodene, who oversees the vineyard in Ethiopia, I posted just the last couple of days that you were here, I posted our picture.
Yeah.
And he sent me, I forgot to tell you, but he sent me a message saying that he met you in Taiwan at some conference in Taiwan.
Oh my. Okay.
And so
it must be in Thailand.
Oh, Thailand maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway,
that's nice.
But he knew that I knew you, and even when I was always wanting you guys to meet, but he just told me that he remembers meeting you and at some kind of deal in Thailand.
Okay, he was there. You showed me his picture yesterday, right. And the face looks familiar, but I had no idea where I saw him, where I met him. That must be Thailand, because one time there was a conference there, an international conference organized by another ministry, not by myself. But I went there to speak and to meet people, and group of Ethiopians were there, many of them, and he must be with them. And they came to meet me, and they met me. We had a chat, and they took pictures with me, and so on and so forth.
That must be it.
That must be.
Yeah. Well, he remembered. So anyway.
Okay. So please send my greetings to him.
I will.
When you.
I will. Well, he's been following me, so hopefully he'll be able to hear this podcast. So. Well, I hope to get to Ethiopia with you and Mulu again sometime soon.
Yes.
We're praying for this new election coming up in June of 2021, praying for peace, obviously.
Yes. Pray for Ethiopia too. Please. Pray for Ethiopia, pray for peace, unity for that nation. We are in a difficult time, so we need prayer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story. I always am amazed to hear this story, and it is one of the most fascinating stories I've heard. It's one of my favorites of all the people that I've met from around the world. And so I am so honored to have you as our guest on Spirituality Adventures. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very pleased to be here with you, most importantly, as a friend. And I'm also pleased to see that you are running this spirituality adventure, which is very important, I believe. And I met some of your friends here in Kansas yesterday. We were together, and I really loved them. And I believe that you will reach out through this program to many, many young people. Thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you for coming, and thanks everybody for joining us at Spirituality Adventures. We'll see you next time.
Thanks again for tuning in. Remember to visit our support page at www.spiritualityadventures.com. If you like what you heard, be sure to share it and leave a comment. Thanks again. Have a great day.
Harvey Media Production.